Hi, this is Alexander Hall, going to be talking to you about my monologue from Fear of Music by Barney Norris. And my monologue is from the character Andy. So I'm going to talk to you about how I did it, leading up to the assessment on the 30th of November, and how I feel I did, etc., etc. So I'm going to start off now from here. So, what specific methods did I use in rehearsals, and how did this help with my assessment? So, when I was practically at home, I thought to myself when I started really learning the part and working around what I could learn from the actual script from reading it was I could see that Andy is like this. He's someone who doesn't want to further his education, and he's trying to kind of stay at home and wait for an opportunity to happen where he could either be in the army because that's what he wants to do because of his dad who went out in the army, because they live in Andover, and Andover is like, it's very close to where army troops are based, so it's more or less, you're gonna get a lot of people who want to join the army in that area, so it's very much like that. Next, the thing that I learned from it was also the amount of music passion he took, even though he was an absolutely terrible guitarist, as you would see. The thing that it's so clear from what I watched, and it was the thing that I really like about Barney Norris is that he wrote to give us like a feel of what the modern way of how we live and what different people go through different times, and how they kind of let themselves be immersed to different futures, and how they get different ambitions, and how they get to achieve the ambitions they want. And I think that this is the thing, that Andy is a lot more of a practical person who wants to find a practical way to be successful. And Andy, and the other thing with his brother Luke, who's already studying at uni, is his way is to like keep himself busy, go to uni, get a degree there, and then go out and see how that degree takes you to like your job, to get yourself a good paid job. Whilst with Andy's just like a bit more lazy, a lot more laid back, doesn't want to try and work too hard. He wants to be a little bit lazy, just try and give himself less slack. And what I think with Luke is that Luke is more or less this character who is trying to stop Andy from joining the army, because it kind of would put a bad name, and also because they lost their dad because of that he died during an attack. They doesn't want the same to happen to Andy, and for Andy to lose all his ambitions due to that. So this is the thing that I really learned from it, and to see how it kind of moved forward from how he talked about wanting to take risk. And also that's another thing, Andy took a lot of risk, with the fact that he wants to go and see Judas Priest. So he lives in Andover, which is not too far from Basingstoke. And he said, "Oh, I've got tickets to see Judas Priest up in Birmingham." And that's like 2.5 hours away. And that's crazy. That's a crazy place to go and see just an evening performance of a gig, when you can probably go and see it locally in London, which is so much less stress. And it's a little bit more, and he also lacks that form of common sense, because he said, "Oh yeah, this guy is driving me there. I'm going out with him," and he's a bad driver. He's been banned from driving, and he's only just got himself back. But also, because his brother Luke is going, "Well, he's been banned. He might be back, but that doesn't mean he's a safe driver. He could crash again." Because you're like scarred. Even if you were a human and you hear something really dangerous happen, and someone did something, and then all of a sudden someone said to you, "Oh yeah, I'm going with him," when he's out, when he's come back from his ban, they'll probably still be thinking, "Yeah, but he crashed his car." You don't want to risk your life for that, do you? You don't want us to be devastated because you didn't think before you acted. So it's that thing that I learned from that particularly. And also with Andy is that he kind of tries to show himself off that he's got this better, that he has better stories to tell, and that he's a lot more well educated, even though he's no longer in education. And Luke is still in education, but he's a lot more, because he's at uni, obviously, his vocabulary is strong, the way he is presentable to people, how he kind of makes himself look like he's like the better, he's got a much more presentable seeing of himself, is that he's basically just trying to make himself look like that him being at uni is going to make him a better, well-rounded person. And it would, because you don't know what's going to happen with that. And leading up to that was when Andy said, well, like the Badger ones. And that's when it kind of got really quite emotional, because it kind of linked to Luke going, that is scary. That is a bit hard. That is sad. And then, that kind of changes the atmosphere. And that's how I learned through trying to get to the monologue and really giving that monologue the best I could. Because with that play, it led to them just having an argument, and all of a sudden, Andy's telling quite a dark story, which is actually quite heartwarming, which would really change the way you react to what you hit. And it's changing reaction to reaction, which is one of the things that I had to kind of learn on the job from doing. So it got from that. And it turned into me, strengthening myself with using props. So when I talked about the stick, I wanted to actually literally get a stick. And that worked really well in terms of when presenting it and looking it back on video. And, it all looked effective, especially. But yeah, it all kind of methodly, it was all, I found really good methods to get myself to that area. And, I used a lot of other useful tips, like learning the first few lines before going into the monologue to get myself completely into that character. Because if you just go in and you just say the first line, that's just the first line. But you want to try and learn the first few lines so you can say it in your head and then go, I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to just start. So that's one of the things that I learned with that. And using, obviously, and also, using a bit of comedic action, like imitating the Badger thrashing on the road after being run over by Andy, who was cycling down the road. And using that and also really looking really neutral and really quite heartfelt. And just when you see him dying, you're going, he's dying. Oh my days, he's dying. Do you know what I mean? And having really tried to really show that in your own, through facial expression and physical expression, not being so like over dramatic, and really having a moment just to be like, he's died. He's died. You know what I mean? But yeah. How did this convey with rehearsals? So what I felt is I was able to find a fine balance of appropriate moments. So when I was talking about freewheeling down this hill, singing the chorus, to get the chorus right, I wanted to try and use that section where I was kind of talking about me cycling. So I wanted to, because I felt like, I wanted to be quite literal in how I explained the whole monologue through my characterization, was just using you pretending to be on the bike, going around singing the chorus and actually singing, just doing like a bit of a scene, going freewheeling down this hill, singing the chorus. Well, to get the chorus right, and that was really effective in that time, just so it could like really visual, and so it's a lot more visual for an audience perspective when you're trying to like go down, because if when you go to a stage show and you get those screen things behind you and you get someone who might be on their bike and the screen is looking like they're like they're actually on that journey. And he wants to kind of do that even without that. So I wanted to see how that worked, and it looked really effective from looking back at it. Next thing I did was, finding that serious mode to find my way into being quite heartfelt and quite serious about how bad this was for me, looking at the badger dying and knowing that was my fault. Like you can see from just talking about it, actually it's going to me. But yeah, it also finding the moment to change the way you're kind of getting facially involved and putting that emotion and creating a different set to how you see the monologue changing, and finding the right area of change to really make it look like it's got that variety of emotion, to not just be like it's just a vague monologue, because if it's a vague monologue it just looks boring. You want to find that different balance to really make it sound like I can actually tell what's going on. And that's one of the things that I do quite a lot, because it's, with me being over the top and being quite an over the top actor, is I try to think a lot about doing the best I can to, find a good balance of being quite up and up and up, and then all of a sudden stopping. And, just stopping at the right time. Because, a musical would not always be like always exciting. You get moments where you have to be really quite neutral. So using that is quite a good way of getting that. And that's probably the reason why it's so suitable for me. The next thing I want to say is that I used good form of improvisation when experimenting with the piece. So that I wanted to experiment by using a mixture of props, trying to find the right prop that was going to work, having the right form of costume, because I think for this I wanted to have like a mixture of a smart waistcoat, a smart t-shirt at the back, and then having like a fleece behind it, like a black fleece which had like a school badge on it, just to kind of give it that like rocky feel, because Andy was quite a rocky character who liked rock music, so he wanted to give him that feel and see if it worked for him in that way. But yeah, that really was where I kind of went off. And how did my rehearsal process go? So it felt really smooth. I came prepared from the first rehearsal, knew my lines because we went over it a few times. But I was quite keen just to be off book and just experiment, because I thought, it'll be better just to be off book and just do it and see what happens. And it worked really. The pace of it was getting there. I learned a lot from growing that plum up. Start from a small plum to a big plum. And, the process was consistent. I kept applying new feedback, so working on my pace, particularly articulation, use of comedy areas to change, but also using that use of trying to make sure my face was to be seen, because I think the one thing I did a lot of beforehand was I kept on having my face down, and no one could see my facial expression when thrashing like the badger on the road. And then I found myself dropping and my face was just down on the floor instead of being up and being able to be seen. So I kind of thought, okay, I'm going to just drop like this. Just to give it that feel. Yeah, all good on that side. The next thing I would give off would probably be really fully immersing myself from all the feedback I got from Leanne, particularly my one-to-one session that I got with her, which was like mid-November, on how to really find the physical balance of how to get through that monologue fully, and using different methods that were going to strengthen the character and strengthen what I had in me, and really knowing the mixture of comedy that I could give to it and the mixture of seriousness that came into it. And it all all really worked. And you know, I kind of started to really look at how much of a realistic writer Barney Norris really is, because he wants to use reality and use his visual use of telling a true story, which might not be true, but it's kind of like, was it true? Could it be true? It's kind of like a rhetorical, he's kind of got this kind of rhetorical narrative of his that he kind of writes from. So it's kind of quite unique. I don't know many who do that, but he's I think that's what's made him quite a strong writer, and quite a well-rounded writer as well. So yeah, so what were my strengths from the assessment? So firstly, good eyeline. I felt like my eyeline was really there. I wasn't distracted by everyone else. I kind of wanted to immerse myself into the moment. And the moment was really clear. I didn't look away from anything. I tried to keep completely constructed into the whole area itself, and just enjoying the moment as well, because that's what you've got to do as an actor. You've got to kind of forget everyone around you and just stay in the moment. The other thing would be finding the right use of nuance. So obviously, starting from, you know, when I was going on saying, so I was cycling down this hill, singing the chorus, well, you know, to get the chorus right, because the song was so wicked, and then these three badgers ran out in front of me. The thing that I did a lot of was I said, because the song was so wicked and these three badgers ran out in front of me, you know, it sounds like, you know, just staying on talking about the song instead of changing the subject, because you're talking about the song, and then you go, to get the chorus right, because the song was so wicked, and then, oh, these three badgers ran out in front of me. You see the difference? The change, the dynamic change from different topics is the thing that I wanted to try and get myself towards in that sense, and use that as the best strength for me. And it worked really to the right extent in that time. So yeah. The other thing that I did also quite well was pace. I was able to keep up with what I was saying. It sounded like, you know, it was consistent. It was well-rounded as a full piece of work. And it just stayed like, you know, I could hear what I was saying. I did not feel like, oh, I didn't hear that words very well, because I knew from listening to how I was slowing down. It helped me listen really well when listening back to myself, and it helped. So, you know, if you have good grammar vocally, it works so well as an actor, and that's the one thing that a lot of actors don't have. And, you know, our grammar is normally really bad when we're speaking, and we use that as part of our acting. But if you try to keep that out and you use a different method to get yourself into a different zone, it helps so much if you want to be doing this as a profession. So yeah, emotion was capturing and mesmerizing, especially when I was mentioning about the badger on its dying throat, you know, because, you know, that was quite a heartwarming moment, and you could really feel the sorrow going through Andy. And I think once watching it, it was really, you know, I couldn't see my face in the video, but I could tell that I was kind of really in the moment saying, he's saying goodbye, he's dying. Like, you could feel myself crying looking at it. And I think that's what you've really got to do. And that can really help, you know, an audience really feel for the character as well. And that's a really big skill that a lot of actors don't have, is having that effectiveness to really capture the heartstrings. So there you go. What are my weaknesses? Too much emphasis, especially when I was saying, you know, to get the chorus right. Because it sounded like, when I was looking back, it sounded, you know, to get the chorus right. Way too much emphasis probably was not needed. You know, pace is helpful, but really slow down. That's the one thing that I would do that I need to be really aware of. Being aware of pace. Pace is crucial. Doing pace is massive. And that's what's going to help me if I want to get this across to the right extent. So that's all good on that side. So just making sure that I don't have too much emphasis that I give into it. So really go, to get the chorus right, and because the song was so wicked, and these three badgers ran out in front of me. That's the difference between when I did it in the actual video. Tone. The other thing that I felt was bad was when I was going on wobbling on my bike. It sounded more like when I was going, whoa, wobbling and breaking. I just went, whoa, like wobbling and breaking. Sounded really quite up in the head, and I don't think you get a man doing that. I don't think in Andover you get someone who would squeak or go, whoa. Apart from if you really didn't, or even if you were not, if you were a child, yeah, you'd probably go, wow! But if you were someone my age, you would probably not do that. But that's probably because that was me. A thing to do is don't be so caught up with what you do. Try and change that to someone else and see what happens. That's the same thing I'd say. That's something that I do a lot. Thinking about changing the voice and changing like tones that I don't use as myself, which could do a lot of good. Voice actors do it. It could help. Next thing is I felt like my excitement kind of didn't work on a few moments because there was more points where my excitement was shown in some of the desperate sections of the monologue. So examples would be, I went back to it and I picked up a stick. And when I look back at it, I saw myself smiling a little bit. And I don't think you would smile when you've just realised that you've just seen a badger dying, thrashing, and you thought, oh, that was me. I've got to go back to it. So you'd be like, I went back to it. And I picked up a stick. Because you're meant to finish them off. Instead of, I went back to it. I picked up a stick. Because you're meant to finish them off. And the difference with that is the way the mouth is widened. So you're making sure that you show the right facial expression in that section. Also, my other thing was hesitating when finding the stick. If you didn't see, I turned myself somewhere else where there were no sticks, and then I went, I'm going it's that way. So I knew from that point I hesitated to find it, even though being in character, I did hesitate a lot when picking up the stick. When you are trying to find your stick, unless you're being directed this, it's best to know where to go to get the stick. If you are just turning and then you go diagonal and then go that way, it just looks like you've more or less mostly just forgotten where it is, and then you've just gone, oh, it's there. Because it's like a moment where you forget, which we all have. But when you're acting, you want to make sure that you are doing it with as much confidence, that you're turning in the right direction to find the right things. Otherwise, it would just look like, oh, a tree's there. No, they're not. They're there. Don't do that. Unless it's for the effect. Unless it's unless it's in the script or the director's asked you to do it. Don't do it. So what am I going to do to improve my weaknesses? So think about not getting too over-exaggerate and find more nuances instead of keeping to the same ones, which is a massive one to do. Also, make sure my tone fits the scene without it sounding like I'm enjoying a roller coaster. When you have that tone when you're when I was going, whoa, like wobbling and breaking, that tone sounded like I was on a roller coaster pretty much. Going, woo! Don't just kind of back that in and go, whoa, like wobbling and breaking, whoa. Second one I hit, got up and ran on. Difference there. Don't try and give it like this enjoyment tone of wooing, So find the much more serious whoa, because that's something you probably do, unless you have quite a high voice. Yeah, and tone my enthusiasm down, especially on serious moments. So, of course, with talking about when the badger was dying, and it is a squirrel for a minute. Badger was dying, just really thinking, oh, he's dying, oh dear, you know. And just prepare where the props go. So when a prop is on stage, don't just be like, oh, that way, unless you're being directed to, unless that's like a direction you have to do. Just make sure you fully know where it is. Otherwise, if it just looks like you've just forgotten where it is and you've just turned away and then you turn back to it, it could delay the process of the monologue, or process the dialogue, process the song, whatever it is. Make sure that you know exactly where all your props are at the right time. So that's it for me. That's me talking about Andy's monologue from Fear of Music, which was assessed on the 30th of November. Thank you very much for watching, and good day to you.